read this in 1 minute. You'll get an idea of the subject, topic, and a rough idea of the level of difficulty from the language and the topic. Among the ocean's menagerie of bizarre creatures, sea dragons stand out. Relatives of seahorses and pipefish, sea dragons have long, narrow snouts. Okay, so this passage is about sea dragons. This is a biology, zoology related passage, science related passage. Should be easy to moderate, cannot be too difficult, because the language will have may have a lot of little bit of technical terms, but they will not be difficult. So you should read ahead. Now I'm assuming you're reading it because I'm going to give you the answers to the passage, but I'll quickly tell you the summary of the passage, which is what you should do when you read any passage in CAT. The first one says that sea dragons are bizarre. The sea is full of bizarre creatures, but sea dragon is probably the most bizarre. Why? Because, and he describes, they have long snouts, which they use like a straw. You know, a snout is an extended portion of the nose and mouth. And then he says they don't have scales like fish. They have a body armor and their backbone is twisted. So they look weird. So one person, he quotes a researcher and he says, Bill Cresco says, how did this fish turn out like this? How does it look like this? And then he says that researchers are fascinated by this question. How can you have an organism which looks like that? What has changed in the genes of this organism that it looks like this? Which is why they did a research or a study on sea dragons. The strange appearance is what made them look deeper into the sea dragon and its genetic makeup. They found that a particular growth factor gene called fibroblast growth factor genes seem to be missing in sea dragons, and these fibroblast growth factor genes are responsible for the growth of teeth, bones, and such things. Therefore, maybe it's strange appearances because it is missing the fibroblast development genes. Teeth are missing. Sea dragon doesn't have teeth. That's what they found out. They were surprised to see that sea dragons are missing several of these key developmental genes. How did I come up with red? Let me change the pen color to something else. Let me change it to blue. Okay. All right. Then they said that they didn't have these growth genes, but they had something else. They had repetitive section of codes called transposons. Okay, which because of its repetitive nature, earlier researchers used to call them junk genes, because there are so many of them, the repetitive structure is there, so they call them junk genes. But recent research has shown, or the research we're talking about has shown, that transposons or jumping genes are actually capable of cutting and pasting themselves from one spot to another in the genetic code, preventing other genes from shaping an organism's traits. So this is the function of these so-called junk genes or transposons. But they're not very sure what these transposons actually do. They know that it prevents other genes from shaping an organism's traits, but they are still not sure if the jumping genes are also responsible for the absence of the growth factor genes. All right, so it might be because of its position, but they are not very sure, and they say we need further research to find out if indeed the transposons are responsible for the missing growth factor genes. The next part, he says that a sea dragon is an example of evolution gone wild. Okay, they look like crazy animals if you look at other things. But knowing the genetic makeup of sea dragons would help on conservation of sea dragons. Why do we need to do that? Because they are rare in the wild. You hardly see these in the wild. They are very hard to keep in captivity, and it is almost impossible to breed them in captivity. These are the 3 points he says. So they want to understand the genetic makeup so that they can conserve these strange exotic creatures. Clear? This is our main point. Now, if you read the passage like this, all the questions become easy. This passage was called moderate, or most students would term it moderate, only because the questions required you to go back to the passage to confirm which of them is the right answer, which is always a good thing to do when you are looking at factual, direct, fact-based questions. Always good, because many of the answers could state facts given in the passage along with one fact which is twisted. So it's good to confirm that what the answer that you think is right is actually the correct option. All right, let's look at the questions. Question 3. Researchers who study sea dragons are fundamentally doing it for which of the following reasons? Now, if you read the passage carefully, there was the end of paragraph 1 and the beginning of paragraph 2 told us why exactly are they doing it. If you go back to paragraph 1 and 2 quickly, we will know what the answer is. End of paragraph 1, actually end of paragraph 2 says, he and his colleagues want to know how these fish came to look the way they do. How do they look so strange? Long snouts, curved tail, curved backbone. How did they turn out like that? How can you have an organism that looks like that? What has changed in their genes? And because of that, they did a study and they tried to answer the question. So why were researchers doing a study on sea dragons? To find out why it looks the way it does. And so which is the answer? The sea dragon's unusual gene pool contains lot of transposons. After they did the research, they found out about the transposons. But why did they decide to do the research in the first place? Right? The lack of any development genes in sea dragons is common among other creatures. Did he say that? Again, they found the lack of development genes only after they decided to do a research. Why did they decide to do? Why were they fascinated by sea dragons? They are rare in the wild and hard to keep or breed in captivity. True, this is a fact mentioned about the sea dragon, but is it? Is that the reason they wanted to do the research? No, they did it because of the sea dragon's weird appearance, strange appearance, peculiar shape, a snout, a body armor instead of scales, and twisted or curved backs. So the strange appearance made them decide to do further research on it. Clear? So the answer is D.